Hello, this is the Archaeology of Animal Bones. It was recorded in the summer of 2018. Trying to get up to date with lots of the videos that I've been teaching for Archaeology Cymru in Lantworth Major, Bridgend, Arnside, Roos, Rhondda and Barry. And so what we're looking at is an image of the first image that we're going to come up with is human remains, and obviously you'll clearly see the difference between human remains and what's coming up now. Lots of the images come up quick and fast. It's a collection of bones from a pig. The main assemblages on archaeological sites, sort of a pig, cattle and sheep. Lots of sites around the world. Animal bones are really all we have in the sense of artifacts. If you look at this image, what we have, we've got a collection of cattle bones. One of the key points I was making while I was teaching this was that on development sites there are so many bones being recovered from various different animals that they're really difficult to examine every single one and to get the adequate data required. It's to do with resources and the number of personnel available. Animal bones are very important and they can tell you a great deal about the past. Arrangements of sheep bones, I do believe here, and a complete skeletal record. Again, lots of fowl bones here, soft and very much available on site. These two wonderful beasts here are from a burial associated with a human being. These animals being butchered as they stood, poleaxed, to accompany the human being into the afterlife. Trays and trays of archaeological finds containing bones need to be studied to that level in archaeology. Butchered bones there, usually able to just take a sample of what's on an archaeological site. There was a lot of information about bone identification. We got some images coming up, just general, which I'm sure everybody can sort of look at and sort of freeze frame. But I think examining bones is something that has to be readily understandable within the archaeology as you're excavating, and to work out the basic difference between a human bone and cattle bone, and then cattle and sheep, to give you an idea of sort of direct interpretation on an archaeological site, which is really important. Differences, subtle difference between sheep, between cattle and cow would be really useful. So obviously these slides that are coming up immediately now, sort of free frame them, read the information as I was able to do whilst I was teaching this. And I think everybody thinks of archaeology as bones, not as pottery and stuff. So whenever you talk about archaeology, they think, oh, bones, skulls and so on. So we're readily available associated with that sort of very makeup that makes us archaeologists, Indiana Jones and skeletons. So it's a very strange topic to be teaching, really, animal bones, to try and really put in some kind of order. And one thing I just sort of went into was to sort of try and understand native breeds of animals that you can find in Britain, looking at this arrangement of pig slides which are in the background now, understanding that pigs in Britain were a lot shorter, a lot more squatter, shorter legs, and obviously evolving into the meat carrying varieties today. Saw some wonderful Gloucester old spot pigs in a church in the Vale of Glamorgan, and you can look at that breed and think, right, obviously that's a breed that isn't ancient, the past few hundred years, but the more ancient breeds of pig were a lot more shorter and squatter. And lots of the images that we're seeing in the background, these ones now are sort of hybrid breeds, but this one is more like, the Berkshire here is more like the original type of pig that was domesticated many, many years ago. And to get an idea of domestication, it's quite a simple process. You, in the litter of pigs, what you simply do, you have two sows. They have flukes, so they got each of them has one white pig in the litter, and then you breed from those white pigs, and you get a white breed. It's basically as simple as that. So now, as you can probably work out in the background, we're over the sheep. We're talking about native varieties of animals in this country. In light of cattle, there are very few ancient breeds of cattle around. Pigs are a bit limited. We've got a wild pigs, which is a good stock in Britain, but there are lots of isolated breeds of sheep on some of the Hebridean and Orcadian islands, such as the island of Rousey. I think the reason why I use these images in a lecture about the archaeology of bones is just to sort of say, well, you might get the identification of cattle bones in archaeology, but there are so many different variants of those cattle bones. You've got to be a real true expert on what you're seeing in the archaeology. It's always a great delight to excavate animal bones because you're getting an idea not only what they're eating, what sort of animals were actually living around them, sort of what made the community tick, what they saw as domestication. And obviously, when you're talking about cattle, you're not always talking about eating them. You're talking about using them as draft animals to pull things and to help in the building industry and so on. And I always say the thing to my students that if you're finding potential foodstuffs which you associate with being food, you don't always need to think of them in the way that they're being just consumed for human use in the food chain. For example, you might just keep a sheep for its wool and you're not going to eat it, and you might keep a horned cow, for example, for pulling carts and so on, and you might actually use the cattle itself for its horns. So I think you've always got to be really careful in archaeology how to interpret things. It's not always black and white. I'm looking at the archaeology of sort of bread and wine at this minute, and lots of things that we do see, like, for example, bog butter. Bog butter is not necessarily being used for consumption. It could be used for lighting and for varying other processes. And I've always liked to say, we've got an article in the background about Stonehenge and the solstice, and obviously always be really, really careful when reading these articles when it says, there's lots of cattle bone here. It's obviously evidence of a feast. The question is, was it? And archaeologists always like to jump to wonderful conclusions. And it was a short video, really, the archaeology of animal bones, and hopefully it's been of some use. This is KARL-JAMES Langford, and I'm going to try and I've got so many videos to get up to date, and hopefully you can be with me to hear and watch more. Thank you. Thanks for your support.